Good morning. It's a cold day in New York City, and I think it's an equally cold day, probably across most of the United States. Friends of mine told me that they were in Austin, Texas for a bachelor party. It was 29 degrees. That's cold. We can do something about the weather. Not me and you individually, but Congress can. The president can, but not this Congress. Not with the House and Senate structured as it is, with the two extremes. The GOP, I guess they're going to keep insisting upon extending the deadline for the budget until November and pass nothing. But by doing that, I wonder if they understand they're giving aid and comfort to the enemy. And there is a common enemy for us, Iran. Iran, the puppet master for the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and you name it. And they're supplying weapons to Russia, just like North Korea is supplying weapons to Russia. Why should we not be making those deals that we're supposed to be making to fund our allies, the Ukrainians and the Israelis? No. Instead, they're just moving the goal line forward for the budget. And nothing else gets done. They want immigration law? Well, present a decent immigration law. Do something. And Biden could sign it. At this point, it's so important not to give aid and comfort to Russia. And by not signing the aid bills for Ukraine and Iran, you're being extremely unpatriotic. Iranian proxies are shooting at our ships. It's getting so bad, China thinks they're going to start monitoring trade on the seas because it's affecting their trade routes also. This is a global problem. And you got the same bad actors, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Why give them aid and comfort? Ukraine needs our help, just like they need the help of the EU nations. They need help to combat an incursion that was none of their fault. In Iran shouldn't be fighting Pakistan. They've gotten too much arrogance in them that they think they can take on the world and the world is going to back down. I think it's about time that all of these three nations were squelched, and there's gotta be a way to squelch them. Many people didn't know the North Koreans built the tunnels in Lebanon. I wonder if they were in Gaza too, all while the UN was there. 350 miles of underground infrastructure? No wonder Gaza flooded out all the time. There was no place for the water to go once it hit the concrete. I saw that explosion under the university building, and I could only wonder what in the world was underneath it to cause an explosion like that. It had to be fuel. Rocket fuel. What else could cause such devastation? So, this is a long war, and the Israelis are slogging through it. And sure, the world is clamoring for the Israelis to stop, but they can only really stop when Eisenkot and Gantz and those who are in the war cabinet decide this is the time. And it may be very close to this is the time. Because it seems to me we're not getting the hostages back. Every day I read that more and more hostages have been murdered. And all we're getting are the bodies. So, what is it, folks? What is more important? Destroying Hamas, which means we could be destroying Israel, or saying we want the hostages, we want a break, and then we'll reconsider next steps. Because there will be a day after, and it may not be what Bibi envisions, but it'll be a day after. And if the Saudis and the Emirates and others are willing to rebuild Gaza, as long as it's demilitarized and there'll be no more wars, well, I think it's a better place for everyone. Giving peace a chance is a good idea. What happens to Sinwar and his 3 compatriots? I don't know. But I do know that they're not worth the lives of 100+ people. And I think that the time is now to consider, do we give peace a chance? Israelis certainly are suffering. They are traumatized, and it'll take generations to get over the massacre of October 7th. There must be decent Palestinians in Gaza, and they too are traumatized. Maybe that now's the time for a long think about short-term, mid-term, and long-term plans. Because I think it's important to get the hostages back and to know as soon as possible what condition those poor people are in. Sinwar's life and his compatriots, as heinous as they are, they're not worth it. And I gotta say that the Republican Party, by doing what they're doing, which is constantly kicking the budget problem down the road, now it's into March, and not resolving one issue or making the laws that the country needs to survive, is a cop-out. The burden you're putting on society is not sustainable. Imagine if FDR had the same problem when he was building the Manhattan Project, the atom bomb. Congress, only 7 people knew about the Manhattan Project. Not even Truman, his vice president, knew about the Manhattan Project. $800 million were given for building the Manhattan Project under the category of expeditious productivity. I don't see any productivity today, and this was back in the 1940s. So, unfortunately, bipartisanship has suffered, the country has suffered, and I say enough is enough. We need a functioning Congress. We ain't got one, but we got to get it in a hurry. And in my short, I'll tell you how we can do it. It worked for the CHIP program. Stay tuned and see you next week. Thank you.